From websites to digital advertising and backed by a money-back lead guarantee, Dealer On is the one-stop shop for all of your digital marketing needs.
This is Automotive Industry News.
Hello and welcome to this week's edition of Automotive Industry News. I'm Stacy King. Our top stories: Cox Automotive Chief Economist Jonathan Smoke sorts out the impact of a tumultuous election, and the ride-hailing industry gets a lift from California voters. But first, the buy here, pay here business can be very rewarding, but it is certainly not easy. There are so many aspects to it: sales, finance, collections, service, that it can be overwhelming. That's why NIADA offers a wide variety of training programs to give BHPH operators the tools to succeed in a complicated and risky business. 3 of those programs have sessions coming up in the next few weeks, all of them available online so you can attend right from your home or office. First up are the BHPH boot camps. Beginning tomorrow, November 17th, the program offers 3 days of intense training in 3 critical areas of your operation: sales, management, and collections. You can register for individual days or all 3, and discounts are available for multiple attendees so you can give your staff the training they need to succeed. Next, BHPH Service Operations Training, to be held November 23rd, offers help with a vital part of the business, because in BHPH, it all starts and ends with the car. Acquiring it, reconditioning it, and servicing it are the keys to success. Finally, an in-depth course in one of the most complex and arguably the most important task of a buy here, pay here operation. NIADA's BHPH accounting training is set for December 2nd and 3rd. To find out more about these virtual training events or to register, visit NIADAeducation.com and click on the training tab. Looking to sell more cars now? Look no further than Dealer On. For over a decade, Dealer On's easy-to-use tools and search-optimized websites have been driving more sales to dealerships than any other website provider in automotive. Backed by a money-back lead guarantee, what do you have to lose? The smoke finally seems to be clearing from a contentious and often chaotic election. While there's still some questions to be answered, such as which party will control the Senate, the picture is coming into focus. But what will that picture look like for the used vehicle industry? Joining us now is Cox Automotive Chief Economist Jonathan Smoke to help us make sense of the new political landscape and what it means for independent dealers. Hi, Jonathan, and welcome to Automotive Industry News. Thank you for joining us today.
Oh, I'm happy to be here.
What if the Republicans retain control of the Senate? How different would that look?
So I think that's likely where we're headed. So I'm paying particular attention to what that possibly means. I definitely think first and foremost the stimulus that we would have had is likely to be a bit smaller, but that stimulus is much needed, and we still think it's going to happen. So we're thinking along the lines of a stimulus package that would happen early in 2021, somewhere between $1 and $2 trillion, as opposed to what could have been in the $2 to $3 trillion range if the Democrats had produced a blue wave and taken over the Senate as well. I was encouraged by the fact that Leader McConnell was signaling that we could get a deal passed even before the end of the year in the lame duck Senate. So those are good signs that we will get stimulus. It just won't be as big as before. Then we have to turn our attention to the regulatory aspect. So under the scenario with Republicans controlling the Senate, we probably won't have the full Biden tax policy or full Biden focus on regulation that we otherwise could have seen. So what we think that that's going to mean for automotive are really in 2 areas. One is environmental regulation. We expect some of the immediate actions to be taking is a quick return to the fuel economy and emission standards that were set by the Obama administration. This is a positive for common rules and objectives across the US and the globe, and manufacturers in particular love this, but it's not good for affordability over the longer term because regulation inevitably leads to more expensive products. So the implication is get used to higher prices in the used vehicle market. Frankly, I think the biggest risk is probably going to be in financial regulation. The biggest regulatory change could come from focusing on strengthening the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, which I think could also be focused very much on auto finance initially. Because if you look at the timing of how trends are happening this year, and we've had low delinquencies and defaults on auto loans and very low repossessions as a result, basically some of those defaults and repossessions are probably simply moved from this calendar year to next calendar year. So we could actually have the new administration suddenly seeing headlines about rising repossessions early in 2021 that's going to get their attention, and I think it's going to strengthen the focus that they're going to have on the CFPB. And that implies tighter credit and higher financing costs, which eventually will limit the demand that could happen.
How would the regulatory environment be different in a Biden administration?
Well, for auto, the key concerns are environmental regulation and financial regulation. If the CFPB is strengthened, then auto loan credit will tighten and it will get more expensive. And that's probably going to happen gradually over the longer term. Environmental regulation will lead to higher vehicle prices, which is something that the market has been adjusting to over the last several years. Depending on what programs are pursued, we could see something like cash for clunkers, but oriented towards replacing internal combustion engines with electric vehicles. I know that dealers were not big fans of that last time that it happened, cash for clunkers, because it cut the vehicle stock and it eliminated trades and potential sales that otherwise would have happened on those vehicles. So those are the things I think the dealers need to be most concerned and worried about.
What effect do you think the uncertainty and turmoil of the political environment will have on consumer behavior in the short term and the long term?
Well, the good news is over the long term, we should see improving certainty because we're eliminating the uncertainty that's been hanging over us for most of this year about what the leadership is going to be like and what will the policies be that they're following. But right now, we don't just have the election outcome uncertainty on us. We also have record numbers of COVID-19 cases happening all around the country. And so actually I'm concerned because we saw consumer sentiment decline fairly substantially last week. And that's an indication that consumers in the short term don't feel so good. Is it all the election? Well, it's hard to separate that from what's going on with COVID-19. But I think when you take that in combination with the exciting news we got today about the first vaccine passing testing and getting ready for use possibly before the end of the year, it really means that you can see light at the end of the tunnel. You can definitely kind of look at the calendar and think that potentially as early as spring, we could really see a turnaround in expectations and positive consumer sentiment. And it really makes me bullish on what 21 is going to look like for used vehicle sales. And I think the spring has enormous potential. But the bad news is, in the short term, we got to get through a dark and cold winter before now and then. So I'm not so positive about the months of November, December, and January, while a lot of these things are still moving, and very likely the COVID-19 situation gets worse before it gets better.
Jonathan, thank you so much for all the insight, and thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
More automotive industry news in a moment. Looking to sell more cars now? Look no further than DealerOn. For over a decade, DealerOn's easy-to-use tools and search-optimized websites have been driving more sales to dealerships than any other website provider in automotive. Backed by a money-back lead guarantee, what do you have to lose? As we reported 2 weeks ago, California voters were faced with a decision that would decide the fate of the ride-hailing industry in their state, and perhaps the nation. Proposition 22 passed by a wide margin, granting app-based transportation and delivery companies an exemption to a California law that had required them to classify their drivers as employees and provide costly benefits such as unemployment insurance, health insurance, and paid sick leave. Ride-hailing giants Uber and Lyft had threatened to shut down operations in California if the measure failed. Instead, their stock rose sharply following passage of Prop 22. Here's more from Bloomberg News.
Ride-hailing giants Uber and Lyft have won a bid in California to keep drivers as independent contractors. Voters in California passed the hotly contested Proposition 22 with a strong majority. This means these companies will be exempt from a state law requiring them to classify most workers as employees. The company spent some $200 million on the campaign, the most expensive ballot initiative in the state's history.
In the future, a lot of work could look like gig work. And we have to make sure that in these times that we preserve the protections that workers deserve in California.
It's about being able to do what we want to do, basically, not what We don't want a boss. We don't want an employer.
I would prefer it stays this way because I like the flexibility of working when I want and being able to stop and go and do whatever I need to do.
Drivers for Uber, DoorDash and others will receive a new set of benefits like a health insurance stipend and minimum hourly earnings. But this is based only on the number of hours they're actively working and not hours spent waiting for each gig. A workers' group organising against Prop 22 on Wednesday said its passing is, quote, a loss for our democracy that could open the door to attempts by corporations to write their own laws. Uber and Lyft alone will save more than $100 million a year on employment costs, according to one estimate.
So Proposition 22 is a ballot measure that really is in some ways a battle between big tech, between, say, Uber, Lyft, DoorDash, Postmates, and big labor. Proposition 22 really wraps up or captures exactly where we're at as workers, as the nation, in terms of our politics, and as a society.
Political and business analysts say Prop 22 could set a precedent for other states as they begin to make policy regarding so-called gig economy workers. Uber has even asked the federal government to consider creating a third class of workers, in addition to employees and independent contractors, with standards similar to those set by Prop 22. That's all for this edition of Automotive Industry News. Thanks for watching. I'm Stacey King.